Hello, and welcome to the Polk Pioneers Oral History Program, a collaboration between the Polk County Historical Association, the Polk County History Center, and PGTV. I'm Murtis Young, Historic Preservation Manager at the History Center. Thank you for joining us today as I have the pleasure of interviewing Vic Story, who is a lifelong Polk Countyan. He grew up in Lake Wales and Frostproof, where he was born in 1945. Vic, thank you for joining us today.
My pleasure.
Oh, thank you. Let's begin our conversation by talking about your family, how your grandparents found their way to Lake Wales, their names, who they are, and how this got started, how the Story family arrived in Polk County.
Okay. My grandfather came from Tennessee with his family about 1905 and settled in Kissimmee. My grandmother, his future wife, came from Kansas about the same time as a young girl and settled in St. Cloud. And so they married about 1915, I think it was. And my dad was born in Kissimmee in 1918. My mother was from Michigan, and her family, she was a first generation. They were German immigrants, and they settled in central Michigan. And so she was the first, she and her brothers and sisters were the first born in this country.
Wow.
And so that's a little history on them.
Share their names, your grandparents first. Your grandfather?
Okay. His name was Lyle Story, and his wife's name was Ethel.
Ethel.
Ethel Mills.
Ethel Mills. And then your parents are?
Victor Sr. and Frida.
Love
My
that.
mother's name was Frida.
Yeah, lovely. So what was it like being a young Vic Story growing up in Frostproof and then Lake Wales?
Okay.
Share some of your early memories.
Well, let me tell you a little history about my parents.
Love to hear that.
They were both in World War II. My dad was a light bomber pilot, and he went to North Africa, one of the first pilots to go to North Africa in 1942.
Wow.
And my mother was a flight evacuation nurse. She had joined the Army Air Corps in 1941. And so they met in North Africa. My dad pilot and my mother was an evacuation nurse, and they met there in North Africa. So I'm a little bit unique. I'm the son of two World War II veterans that were in the thick of it at the time.
So that is quite interesting. So they've met, doing their job, fell in love.
Yes.
And then
my dad, there were 50 pilots that went with him to North Africa in 42. He was one of 5 that survived the war.
Amazing.
It was pretty tough.
Yeah.
And my mother, too, was in a danger area. They would fly in and get the troops and bring them out. And so they both survived the war, and they got married in 1944.
Where were they married?
In Palm Springs, California.
Okay.
And then I was born in Palm Springs, California in 1945, in September, after the war had ended. And they were still in the service at the time.
Okay.
And then they both got discharged about 6 weeks after I was born. And we came back to Florida, where my dad was from. And then they had saved their money during the war. They'd both been overseas. And they bought 110 acres of land down north of Frostproof. And my dad wanted to develop a grove. And my grandfather had planted a nursery on that land while he was in the service after he had bought the land. And so they cleared that land in 1945, late 45, 46, and planted the grove there. And they only had enough money left to build a barn. So I grew up in a one-room barn. My brother was born in 47, and we all lived in a one-room barn. It wasn't anywhere close to the size of this room. And so we all worked out in the grove. My mother, my brother and I, after school, It was a family operation. My dad had other jobs. He would work on the weekends and after work, and so it was a total family operation. And at the time,
Now, tell me, your brother's name is?
his name was Terry.
Terry.
Lyles William. He was named after my grandfather.
Okay.
And
Okay.
he
And so your father had other jobs. What were some of those jobs that you remember?
he ran the sectionizing plant for Florida's, what's now Florida's Natural.
Right.
Back then it was Florida Citrus Canners Cooperative. And he ran that for 5 years. And that was a full-time, more of a full-time job than he didn't leave him a lot of time to work in the grove.
Yeah.
And so he got a job as a rural carrier in the post office there in Frostproof. And that was a great job for him because he'd leave about 6 in the morning and he'd be home, other than Christmas time, he'd be home by 2 o'clock.
That's
and
great.
So when my brother and I got out of school, we'd be home by 3 on the school bus, and we all went to work. That was an ideal job for him. And he kept that job until 1959, when he left that job and went full-time. By then, he had bought a couple other 10-acre blocks, and he had about 100 acres, and so that was his full-time job then.
Okay.
The groves were able to sustain our family at that time.
Fascinating.
And we moved, by the way, in 1959 also, we moved to Lake Wales.
Okay.
And he was making enough money off the groves that he could buy a home in Lake Wales.
You moved out of the barn.
Yep, moved out of the barn.
So you started school in Frostproof.
I did.
I guess, yeah.
And I went to elementary school in Frostproof and Babson Park.
Okay.
And when I went to school in Babson Park for 3 years, we were all in one room. We were in an auditorium. And first grade was in the first row, second grade, the second row, and so on to 6th grade. And I still remember a lot of my classmates because, we were all right there together.
Sure.
And it was 3 years. And then I went the other years to Frostproof and went to 8th grade in Frostproof. And then when I was a freshman, we moved to Lake Wales in '59.
So, my goodness gracious, you are really starting in the citrus industry at a very early age, helping your father. I just wonder, in those memories, did it just seem like that's what we did? That was our entertainment? Did you feel like you were working, or did you feel like you got left out or anything? Or
I enjoyed working in the groves. I could see a future in that. My brother wasn't as, he didn't care for it as much. And of course, my dad never paid us. It was just part of doing the family business. And anyway, I liked to work. And I was pretty good help to my dad by the time I was 8 years old. I was a pretty good sized kid.
wow.
And so it just kind of came natural to me. And of course, my mother did what she could. She was a totally disabled veteran, by the way. She developed a very virulent form of rheumatoid arthritis when she was overseas, and she was a totally disabled. She was a registered nurse, of course, and so she helped out in the grove too. She drove pickups. She did everything she could do. She was quite crippled, but I always credit my mother for the establishment of our business. There's not many women that would have stayed in that barn for 14 years and allowed my dad to establish our business like we did. It was tough living. We didn't have any air or heat or TV or anything. We entertained ourselves at night with card games and things like that.
Sweet.
And we didn't have TV till we moved to Lake Wales.
And tell me again, what year was that?
59,
Okay.
1959.
Yeah.
So, and I was 13 years old at the time. And the only other thing that was unique about, I was the only junior high person that they let play football in Florida, in Frostproof, excuse me. I was on the varsity, and I was 13 years old.
Wow.
I was the only 8th grader on the team, and it was I got bumped around a lot, but I enjoyed it. I had some good coaches. I still remember them.
Mm-hmm.
They were, I was young, and they were nice to me.
Yeah. So then, when you moved to Lake Wales,
Mm-hmm.
you're attending high school,
Yes.
and you continue playing football.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Any memories about any particular game or anything you want to share?
Well, my senior year, we had a not a very good season when I was a junior. We had a good year when I was a sophomore, and a lot of those fellows moved on. They graduated.
Right.
And then we didn't have many good players when I was a junior, and we only won 2 games. So we came to our senior year, and my brother was 2 years younger than me in school, and there was a group of players there. My brother, Lee Turnquist, you may know. There were a lot of really good players that came along, and they were sophomores. And so we had a really good season. We won 6 games. We should have won more. And particularly my last game as a senior with Haines City, who was our rival back then.
Right.
And we had a hard game, and we won. And one of the reasons we won is several of the seniors, the coach, we had a 4th down situation. Coach didn't want to go for it. We called timeout, and we told him we're going to go for it. We're either going to win this game or we're not. And we made a 1st down, and we won the game. And so I remember that today.
Great memory. So now you're leaving school, a proud Highlander, and you're off to college.
Yeah.
Tell us about that phase and chapter of your life.
Okay. Well, I went that summer after I graduated. I'd been accepted to the University of Florida. And no small feat then, as it is now. And so I went to Florida Southern and took 2 courses in the summer.
Mm-hmm.
And so I enjoyed that. I was in class mostly with teachers that were there for summer courses.
Oh, interesting.
So that was interesting. I was 17 years old. I graduated early so then I did well there. And so I'm 17 still, and I'm going to the University of Florida. I'm a freshman at the University of Florida. And I walked on as a football player. I didn't have a scholarship. I could have gone to some smaller schools, but I wanted to go to the University of Florida. And so there I am, 17 years old at Florida, and that was quite a change.
Yeah, big change.
And anyway.
Yeah, that is, it's a big change from Lake Wales to Gainesville. But again, just, that Florida pride, being at Florida.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I went to Florida for a year.
Mm-hmm.
And then my dad needed me to come back and work. And I came home for a year and went to Polk. Polk State was new then.
Uh-huh.
It was at the Bartow Air Base.
Right.
And I went there and took courses at night. I took a couple courses at night each semester. And then I went back to the University of Florida the next year. And then I went that year, and then I dropped out.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to go to work. And
that passion.
Unfortunately, I got drafted, which I knew I would.
Uh-huh.
And I actually volunteered for the Marine Corps. And and I had my orders to report. I'd passed my physical and everything. And so my dad had been run over by a Grove tractor about 5 years before.
Mm.
And he had issues that were lingering, and he ended up in the hospital for 30 days. And so I went to the draft board and said, hey, there's nobody else to work on the Grove. And my brother was in college. He'd gone to college, Georgia Tech, and on a football scholarship. And so there wasn't anybody to look after Grove. My mother wasn't able to do it. And so they gave me 30 days for my dad to get better. Well, he got out of the hospital in 30 days, but he still couldn't work, of course. And so I went to them again, and they said, we'll give you another 30 days to join a Guard or Reserve unit. And so I joined the Army Reserve unit in Lakeland. And I spent 6 years in there.
Okay. So is this is during the period of time the Vietnam conflict is going on at this particular time?
Yes, it was.
Okay. And did you actually have any participation in any service outside the country?
No.
No. Okay.
No, I spent my entire time in the country.
Yeah, that's amazing that they were able to allow you to do that with your father's needs. That's incredible.
Yeah.
So I know from reading your script that you were actually given you received a Distinguished Service Medal from your service. Tell us about that.
Okay. Well, that came along a little later. When Desert Storm was starting to build up, I got a call. I had already been mayor of Lake Wales by then. I was pretty well known in the community, and I had honorably served in the reserves. And I got a call from a major, and he said, we need to have lunch. And I said, well, okay. And he was the commander for the Guard unit in Lake Wales. And must be known to me, they were going to get called up in Desert Storm, which they did. And he said, we need somebody to leave the armory in charge of the armory. All the men are going. And he said, we talked. He said, would you be willing to do that? And I said, I will if you won't pay me. I said, I won't take any compensation for it. And so as they were being called up and doing some last minute training and everything, I participated in I would go every weekend and every time they met and kind of get to know what was going on. And so when they left, then I was in charge of the armory, the arms room, everything.
Wow.
And it was quite a job. There was a financial responsibility also, and to keep up with all all the goings on there. And they established for the men that were gone, and there were some ladies too.
Right.
Their families, they established a point of contact there. They brought some people in from St. Augustine, and so they used the Army on a regular basis. And also while they were gone, they wanted to do some renovations. So I was in charge of all that. And it turned out to be more of a job than I expected it to be honest with you. But I was glad to serve in that capacity. And when they came home, I was relieved of duty, and I received that award, and I appreciated it.
Yeah.
But it was my pleasure to do it because a lot of those men and ladies, it was a tough time over there, and some of them had some illness from it.
Yeah, so. That's an interesting story. If I recall correctly, that unit, your unit, was over retrofitting equipment to change it from the European green to that desert. And I think they had some, they were affected maybe by the paint.
Yes.
Or something. Do you remember, want to elaborate on that story a little bit?
Yeah, you're well informed. Yeah, there was some of them, apparently they didn't have all the protective equipment they needed. Some of them had some lung issues that linger to the day. I know some of the veterans that served. And it was, and if you remember, they set a lot of oil fields on fire over there.
Correct, right.
And just the environment was very hostile. And so, there was a number of them came back with health issues.
Yeah.
And that's a shame.
Yeah, I've read the stories about that, and it was just, they're doing their best to prepare us to have an advantage in serving in an entirely different environment and changing out those paint colors, and just the numbers of the tanks and jeeps and equipment that they changed, and the time in which they accomplished it. So I
Yeah,
know
not just their unit, but that was their job over there. For a lot of units. So there were a lot of it was a full-time, almost 24-hour day operation for them. And they didn't have, according to some of them that I talked to, they didn't have some of the equipment they should have had probably. It was a war zone, and you know, they just didn't have everything they needed, and it affected quite a number of them.
I'm glad you're still in touch with some of those sweet people. That's really great. And yes, it was a different time. It wasn't just men, it was men and women. You know, kind of probably for one of the first times in history, mothers leaving their children at home to go serve the country. Well, thank you for that story, and thank you for your service. It's just so much about what's right about the United States. So thank you about that. So August 9th, 1971, you married Ann Hendrickson of Lake Wales. So tell us, I've read a little bit about your first date. Would you share that first date with us? It's so special.
Okay. Well, it was actually a blind date. We didn't know each other. We're 4 years, she's 4 years my junior. And of course, when you're in high school, 4 years, you don't look at an 8th grader when you're a senior. So anyway, so we didn't know each other. And some mutual friends asked us both over to their home, and we had a cookout, and we I think we liked each other immediately. And after the cookout, at that time, for irrigation in our groves, we used what we call volume guns, and you had to go and move them every 4 hours. Every 4 hours, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.
Wow.
And so it was time to go move the volume guns. And so I asked Ann, I said, hey, you want to go with me out to the grove? And and so she sat in the truck while I turned the motor off and moved these volume guns and turned the motor back on, and so that was our first date. And then I asked her to marry me 2 weeks after we met, and then we married 3 months later in August.
That is a beautiful story.
Yeah. And we celebrate May 6th, the day we met. We celebrate that more than our actual wedding anniversary.
That is so sweet.
Yeah.
Well, it's just
and that's 52 years this year.
52 years.
52.
Congratulations.
Yes, thank you.
That is lovely. And certainly, it's just so typical of the Story family because everybody's involved in the business, right?
That's right. She knew what the deal was from the break.
Yeah. And then you together raised 5 children. So Michelle Ann,
Correct.
Jeffrey Victor, Jennifer Jean,
Yep.
Matthew Spencer, and Kyle Robert. And you have 13 grandchildren, all of whom I understand live in Polk County.
Yeah.
So.
And now we have 1 great-grandchild. He's 1.5 years old.
Oh.
So that's he's a little redhead, and he's a sweetie.
And where is he?
He lives in Lake Wales.
Okay.
His parents live in Lake Wales, and so we get to see him. We try to see him every week. We want him to know us.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Perfect. Beautiful family.
Thank
Great
you.
stories. I've seen pictures, just absolutely warm, precious, and wonderful, the Story family. And I noticed in reading biographical information about you that you and Ann attended First Presbyterian Church in Lake Wales for many years, and you served there in leadership roles, and now you're at High Point Church. I just wanted to ask you to get your feelings about what impact did all those years of being in the church have as you all were raising your family?
Well, I think it's important for a family to worship together. I think it's important for children to be exposed to the Christian faith. I think it's important that at some point they make their own decision about how they feel about their faith. But it's, I think, a parent's responsibility, as far as I'm concerned, to afford them the opportunity to grow up in a Christian home. And hopefully they'll make that decision for themselves, which all my children have, at some point in time for themselves. And I think that's a very important thing to do. I've encouraged all my grandchildren to attend church as well, and almost all of them do. And so I'm proud of that. And I think it gives you an anchor in life that nothing else does.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. I could tell from reading your script that was an important part of yours and Ann's life together. So I appreciate your sharing that.
Yes.
Now, the Story companies. So share with us the origin of the company, the evolution of the company, and then today's mission. What is the story of the Story companies?
Okay. Well, of course, as we talked about earlier, my dad and mother established our first grove. And then while I was still at home, my dad bought a couple small groves, 10 acres, while I was still at home. And then after my college and military service, I had to go for 6 months as part of the Guard, the reserve unit. So when I had all that done and I was working full time, we started buying some other properties as we could. It was hard for us to do it. We didn't have much of a financial backing. There weren't many sources of credit back then.
Mm-hmm.
And so there was one local bank, and they didn't really know us that well. And so primarily what we would do, we would look for properties that were for sale, that people would finance them, give them 10%, 20% down, and then they would hold a note for 5 years or something like that. And that's how we would find different properties. And I spent a lot of time looking for things that were for sale in Polk and Hardy County in particular.
Okay.
And in DeSoto County. And so we formed my dad had his own groves, my dad and my mother. And so then when we started buying some groves, we formed a corporation called Story Groves.
Mm-hmm.
And that included my parents and my brother and I. And even though my brother was in school, my parents, we all wanted to include him. So there was the four of us, and it formed that first corporation. And we bought quite a few groves in that corporation. My dad continued to buy some of it in his name. I started to buy a few groves in my own name, Ann and I did. And then after about 10 years, we formed another corporation that didn't include my brother. It just included my parents and myself and Ann. And then we bought groves in that corporation. And so at some point, when my son Kyle joined the business,
Mm-hmm.
and my son Matt was in the business, and they had some ownership interest too by that time. And so we decided we'd just put an umbrella over it and call it the Story Companies, because it is different entities
Mm-hmm.
that make up that umbrella that we did.
Mm-hmm.
So that just simplified everything a little
Right.
bit. Yeah.
And so it includes operations today that encompass different kinds of services for the
Right.
industry, right?
Yes, we have our own groves that we take care of for ourselves, and then we have groves that we take care of for other people.
Mm-hmm.
We're actually about half and half.
Okay.
And then we lease some groves from some people that don't want to give them up, but they don't want to manage them themselves.
Right.
And so that's worked out. And so it's all under that umbrella.
Mm-hmm.
And then yeah, we also do some custom services besides actual grove care.
Mm-hmm. One of the most devastating things that's happened, of course, in the industry recently is the citrus greening, which
Mm-hmm.
is the psyllid, the Asian insect.
Asian psyllid, yeah.
Asian psyllid. And so many growers have lost their grows to this devastating disease. I just wonder if you would be willing to share with us your thoughts on the future of the industry based on where we are today with that just horrible disease.
Yes. Well, as you know, we've gone, in my time, we've gone from about 250 million boxes a year in orange production, in 55, 57 million boxes of grapefruit production, down to somewhere, I think, in the 20s, millions of boxes this year in the oranges, and less than 5 million in grapefruit. And there's other things that have contributed to that besides greening, urbanization, some other diseases besides greening have contributed to that, but primarily it's been greening. And so there are some of us that are left that have done some really intense nutritional practices that have kept our groves in better shape than most. And I'm proud of that. I've got a good farmer son. My son Matt is a farmer, and he's a good farmer. And then my son Kyle is a business manager. He does a good job at that. He keeps us abreast of opportunities that, particularly in the insurance side, we have some new insurance products that are very helpful to us, particularly in this hurricane a year ago. And so we've taken advantage of those, and not everybody knew how to work those new programs, and Kyle's very good at it. So I've got two sons that are very involved, and I'm happy for that. I'm proud of that. But to answer your question, there is some hope, some new hope here going forward. The nutrition thing seems to be kind of run its course. And even though our grows look better than most, now there's these direct trunk injections that have been approved in January. They've been used in other fruit crops, and we finally got it approved. And so we're doing some direct trunk injections of antibiotics into the tree. It's very regulated. It has to be done 6 months in advance of harvest.
Wow.
And there's been quite a bit of research on it. We're sure we're not going to contaminate the fruit, and it's not going to be in the fruit, in the quality, in the juice. And so we're all working on that. The research that's been done and some other over a 2-year period shows us that it could be very helpful. And
Good
so
news.
we're hanging our hat on that.
Great news. Well, thank you for that. So the Story companies are going to be continuing. I find, just changes in the industry. You mentioned, your father's early career at Lake Wales citrus growers, and, we came to love that Florida's natural brand and, homegrown citrus. And I realized the other day when I bought my orange juice, it's now Florida and juice from select juice from Mexico. It's changed. The industry has changed some with these changes. So congratulations. I admire you all for the evolution and keeping that going. Citrus is such an important, it's just such an important product for us.
I'm hopeful that these treatments will lead to some optimism, and there may be some reinvestment going on in the citrus industry. We are also part of a project over here on the 80-foot road, as you know, where we're growing citrus completely undercover, under screen.
That's cups.
Yes, and we're part of that project. Dundee Citrus Growers is managing that, and my son Kyle is a board member of Dundee, and so we wanted to participate in that. We have a partner that wanted to be. He's one of our growers, and he wanted to be part of it. And so now there's an investment group that's doing a 500-acre project down east of Fort Meade. The trees and the quality of the fruit grown inside is fabulous. It's even better than before greening because you don't have sunburn, you don't have wind scar. It's almost perfect fruit. And even though these grows are only 4 years old, the oldest ones, which we're a part of, the trees are taller than the ceiling here.
Amazing.
And it's really it's refreshing to go in and see it. And I was just in the other day and looked at our pod with our partner, and the trees just look great. I've got a lot of fruit on them, and particularly grapefruit. Red grapefruit are doing very well inside, which they don't do well outside at all.
Yeah, right.
So I'll brag a little bit. I was on the foundation board at the experiment station in Lake Alfred when we we decided to do an experiment where we did an acre project inside, and then we did an acre replicated outside. And I was the first one to say, let's do this. And it was a $350,000 investment with the funds that we had. And it's turned out really good. And it gave us the confidence, that experiment gave us the confidence to do this bigger project outside, and it's turned out really good. The only negative to it is it's a very capital intensive. It's a lot of capital.
Sure.
And it has its risk. We had some damage to the screens from the hurricane last fall.
I wondered about that.
Yeah, a little bit. Wasn't a lot, but a little bit. And then we had a little bit of hail damage the other day.
Okay.
Not a lot, but a little bit. And but the psyllids don't want to go inside that screen. Even if you get a hole in it, they don't seem to want to go inside. And
that is amazing.
Yeah, it is. And so, there'll be more projects. There's some folks from the East Coast that have come over into Central Florida and are doing some projects too. So there'll be several thousand acres under screen shortly, and it's wonderful quality fruit.
Thank you so much for sharing that. It's wow. The innovation to not only save and preserve the industry, to even improve it. Yes. So the quality of the product is better. I wondered about those they're not little tents, it's pretty amazing. So thank you, that's good information. And congratulations that you had the vision to recommend that. And
part of being a pioneer.
Part of being a pioneer, that's right. So let's talk about Vic Story, the civic and community industry leader. So of course, Polk County Farm Service Agency, the Lake Wales Family YMCA, Lake Wales Little League, Hillcrest Elementary PTO, City Commissioner, Mayor of Lake Wales, American Bank and Trust, Board of Directors, concerned property owners of Polk County Board of County Commissioners Task Force on Farm Labor Housing, Polk County Charter Review Committee, Polk Citizens for Good Government, Florida Citrus Mutual, Florida Citrus Commission, the Citrus Disease Research and Development Advisory Board for the United States Department of Agriculture, Florida's Natural Growers, Citrus Research and Education Center Foundation for the University of Florida, American Legion Post 71, Polk County Farm Bureau, Lake Wales Care Center, Polk Vision, the Foundation for Florida Polytechnic University. Vic, that's a long list of organizations, and I'm sure I don't know everything. So what I'd like to ask, what did I miss? What would you like to share with us about other civic involvement or industry involvement?
Okay, thank you. Well, it's been my pleasure to serve. I've been blessed with the resources and the support of my family. My dad was supportive of me serving when he and I were in business together. And now I have my two sons that manage day to day. And so I've had the opportunity to continue to serve. And I just feel led to serve. It seems like opportunities in a small town like Lake Wales, there's not that many people that are able to serve. And so you get called on often. But there's a couple of things that aren't on that list that are very dear to me that I'm doing today. There's a charter school in Lake Wales called Victory Ridge Academy.
Mm-hmm.
It's a charter school for children with learning disabilities, primarily autism.
Mm-hmm.
And I was one of the founders of the school. I'm still their chairman of their foundation board. And we have a campus now that we have the last 3 buildings that we're working on. One of them is called the Early Learning Center. And when we get it built later this summer, we'll be able to do away with all the portables that we've had. We'll be all in permanent buildings. And then we're building another structure about the size of this room that's divided in half, where students can play house, if you will, where they can learn how to take care of themselves. And so we're happy that's something we've been trying to get done. And then we also build a little school bus garage where we can work on our school buses. We have to provide our own transportation. And so we've grown this school to a little less than 400 students, and that's as big as we're going to get. Mm-hmm. The teacher-student ratio there is very high. There's, I believe, 2.5 either teachers or pairs per student, because most of these students, not only do they have learning difficulties, they also have a lot of physical disabilities. Mm-hmm. And we try to provide for that by not only having special ed teachers on campus, we also have physical therapists on campus, where these children can receive everything they need during the day. And most of these children come from families that they have other children that are normal. Mm-hmm. And so this has been a great thing for families, to have all these therapies on campus and taken care of during the day. And I had a granddaughter that went to the school, and she graduated a couple of years ago. And we also have a work program for the students that when they get toward their senior years, and they go out and they work in the community. We have some cooperators, and the Advent Hospital, the Care Center, Publix, McDonald's, all provide internships for these young people. And as a result, my granddaughter now works for Publix. And so we're very proud of that. And our whole goal is for these children to either return to the public school system or they get a job consummate with their abilities. Mm-hmm. And we don't want them to be on the couch the rest of their life. So I'm very proud of what we've done with that charter school. We have some great leadership there. Stephen Whitaker came from the charter school and is our principal, our head of school, and he's done a great job. And some other people that were working, his team, have done a great job. And now we're looking at maybe taking our model and going to where we have children from Osceola, Northeast Polk. Mm-hmm. We have children from the Lakeland area. We have children from North Highlands County that come to our school. And so we have areas of need. Yeah. And we want to establish more campuses. And we have the infrastructure to do it. And unfortunately, there's a need in these communities. So we hope to take our model in the next few years somewhere else.
Congratulations. That's an amazing achievement. And I appreciate you sharing that. Now, you said you had a couple of things you wanted to share. Is there something else?
And then also, I serve on the Vanguard School Board. Okay. That's a different set of students that have learning difficulties. That's a boarding school. It's also a day, what we call full-time boarding, weekly boarding, and day school. And we have a little over 100 students there. It's a little different. Those children are primarily have different learning difficulties, that we can, there's a dedicated staff there too. And we've got a new head of schools that's been there a couple of years. He's done a great job of bringing the team together, and I'm proud of serving on that board. And then the other thing that I've done recently is at the old Chalet Suzanne restaurant there in Lake Wales, we've established a rehab center. We call it Refuge on the Ridge. And there's a young man named Andy Blair who had a vision to do it. And it's connected with High Point Church. And it's a faith-based rehab center. And we have about 25 men. We hope to establish a ladies program shortly. But we've renovated the old chalet and for living quarters for them. And these guys are really unique. I'm so proud of them. And we've had about 15 graduate from our program. We've been in business for 2 years. And I say business, this is a nonprofit. But we've had about 15 graduate. Some of them have continued to stay there as counselors. But it's heartening. And most of these guys that are there are blue collar kind of guys. They can do anything.
Yeah.
And so they've made their own way. Most of them don't have the resources to go to a expensive rehab center. So they've made their own way by doing different projects that we get paid for. Renovation projects, all kinds of things. And they've rehabbed that place, the chalet. The Henshaw family was very generous and allows us to use it. And anyway, I've been proud to be a part of that. I was one of the founders of that. And so I feel like I've continued my pioneer tradition a little bit here in a lot of different ways. And one thing that's important to me is that there's some young people that are following in footsteps that it doesn't do you any good to be a pioneer if there's not a continuation of what you established. So I'm proud of that. Yeah.
And we're proud of you, and we thank you so much for sharing your story with us today. And we thank you for taking the time to hear the story of this amazing gentleman, a man of great faith, a man who loves family, the gentleman who is a visionary in his industry, has a heart for the community, has a heart to care for children, and is indeed a pioneer. And thank you on behalf of the Polk County Historical Association, the Polk County History Center, and PGTV for joining us.